Hello, my name is Ronald Miranda, and today my presentation will be on music's effect on South African apartheid. I will be going over the background information surrounding the apartheid, and then I will be going over South African music and its effect on the apartheid. To start off with some background surrounding South Africa, it first became the Union of South Africa in 1910 with the South Africa Act. This would later lead into the Land Act of 1913, a move that would eventually lead to apartheid. The Land Act limited the amount of land that black natives were to have throughout the entire country. This was one of the first signs of the segregation that would come later. Fast forward to the end of World War II, the country of South Africa had a huge economic issue. This was also when the White Nationalist Party took control of the government and began enforcing segregation laws all throughout the land. From this point on, there was a heavy amount of segregation, some of it even turning violent. Eventually going off of the Land Act, black South Africans were forced out of their towns and placed into townships, considerably far from majority white cities. However, the end of apartheid would come after international pressure, in which a new government was installed with Frederick Willem de Klerk, and along with Nelson Mandela, a new constitution was formed in 1994, effectively ending apartheid and bringing about the modern-day Republic of South Africa. To segue into the musical and more cultural aspect of apartheid, I wanted to discuss one of the most important cities during apartheid, Sophiatown. Its most notable feature geographically was its somewhat close proximity from Johannesburg, a heavily white populated city. However, it was mostly a cultural holy ground for blacks, where artists of all genres, physical and performing arts, were birthed and cultivated. Its rich environment also led to many anti-apartheid organizations to develop there. However, since it was somewhat close to Johannesburg, the entire city was razed and the populace was forced to townships. This started the We Won't Move movement, a method of protesting the forcible movement. The picture demonstrated shows how people weren't fazed by the mandate at first and were calm and did not intend on moving. They also showed their support for the movement by making sure that everybody in the town knew the slogan. To begin discussing South African music, one must analyze its rich history. Tribes had different traditions and different songs, so when the Union of South Africa was created, there was an influx of cultures. Specifically, the musics were combined and evolved heavily, and many different styles were created, such as bubblegum pop. However, this is not to say that South Africa was not influenced by others. There was a heavy Western inspiration that caused for many artists to emerge during the 20th century, some of them being alternative rock and jazz. At first, they were mostly black artists, but the music scene eventually became interracial in South Africa, and there were even interracial bands. This all happened later during the apartheid, when there was more support from the white side and the international community. However, how did this support come about? Well, it started with some key individuals. Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba were both artists that were caught in the imprisonment during the Sharpeville massacre. During this massacre, many were killed in the township, and much more were imprisoned. It didn't matter who the people were, as some musicians and other important celebrities in South Africa was also imprisoned. These two artists, and along with many others, developed prison songs that were very influential inside of the actual prison. One of the other influential artists was Wisil Mini. Wisil Mini was also in prison, however she wasn't in prison during the Sharpeville massacre. Nevertheless, she was very influential and developed one of the most important songs, Behold the Advancing Blacks Verwoerd. Hendrik Verwoerd was the Prime Minister of South Africa at the time, and was very disliked by the black community. This song was also sung with Nelson Mandela during prison, and it was sung out of prison as well once Nelson Mandela was freed. These songs got a lot of traction in the international community. And one of the other groups that was actually developed because of the apartheid was Artists United Against Apartheid. Here's a picture of the group Artists United Against Apartheid. Artists United Against Apartheid was developed in 1985 in response to the apartheid. It was an international response to the apartheid that was mostly focused in the United States. Specifically, it was also focused on a controversial part of South Africa called Sound City. Sun City was a place where a lot of entertainment was being held, regardless of where the artists were coming from. However, many artists decided to boycott performing in this city in response to apartheid. Artists United Against Apartheid specifically boycotted this and made sure that all of the artists were under oath and pledge to not perform in Sun City. It gained a lot of traction and was very similar to the group that developed We Are the World. However, it did not get as much traction, but it still managed to raise money that helped fund educational schools in Bantu communities. To go even deeper into the artists, specifically in the artists that united against apartheid, Afrika Bambaataa was a very popular MC during the 1970s. He is also one of the first founders of one of the first musical hip-hop groups that was developed in 1977. The group that Afrika Bambaataa was actually a part of developed many songs that were focused towards Africa and its community. One of these songs has to do with the Zulu nation, specifically referencing one of the tribes of Africa. Having discussed some of the musicians during apartheid, I will now be discussing specifically how music was seen and spread. Music specifically combating apartheid came due to the struggle and segregation that they were dealing with. Many people who were able to sing before now decided to act upon their gift and sing in order to bring awareness. As stated before, anti-apartheid music was developed in numerous genres. It did not matter which artist it was. There were multiple genres that fell under the movement. However, the national distribution of music was not as strong as it could have been. This was due to the radio station that was available to the public being run by the government. The strategy that the government took was specifically to try and influence citizens subconsciously by implementing songs that talked about how the distinction between others was good. They also tried to block all anti-apartheid songs. However, some of the songs were in the Afrikaans language, and township songs such as Meadowlands, which was specifically talking about the resistance towards the idea of townships, was aired on the radio. So while some of the music that the government aired was meant to strengthen the idea of apartheid, it was not as effective as they thought, as there were other songs that were anti-apartheid. Now I will be specifically talking about music's effect on apartheid. There was a quote made in the Amanda film that said, "Music communicates better than political speeches." The example that was used here was due to the boring format of political speeches and how they never managed to convey true emotions and feelings. However, when people are presented with music, it turns out that they're actually able to resonate and show sympathy with the people who are dealing with the situation, in this case, apartheid. It also was very easy to spread as it was just a form of music and entertainment. While South Africa had their own regulations and limitations on the type of protest music against apartheid, the international community gladly accepted other songs and artists who were fleeing South Africa in order to gain publicity on the issue. This is how international communities were impacted, and they were definitely influenced and motivated to stop apartheid. There was another push for music to affect apartheid, and that was with the Botswana Festival of Culture and Resistance of 1982. This festival was not specifically targeted towards Black communities, but also towards white communities. Here I've demonstrated a poster for the Botswana Festival of Culture and Resistance. This festival was very important as it managed to raise awareness as to what apartheid was, and specifically how to combat it. The picture demonstrated shows a hand on fire and another hand seemingly resisting it, symbolizing the type of resistance that is needed in order to combat apartheid. Overall, the influence that music had on both national and international communities helped to stop South African apartheid. The support that was seen throughout all communities came about due to the impact of music and other literates. However, music's unique way of telling stories was able to be fully utilized to gain sympathy and raise awareness on the situation in South Africa. After the end of apartheid, many musicians continued to prosper. While some were executed or died during the meantime, They were given both memorials and even noted as heroes due to their contribution. Sun City was also opened up, and the boycott that was placed on them by the community was slowly pried open. To conclude, I'd like to leave off on the importance of music. While music is mostly seen as a form of entertainment, there are a lot of musicians who use their bass as a political platform. With the introduction of social media, problems such as these are getting much more attention than journalists were ever able to reveal about it. But the essence of music and how it is able to bring people together under a firm understanding is what is truly special about it. As Plato noted, when modes of music change, the fundamental laws of the state always change with them. Thank you.